Hello, everyone. Norwegian officials have repeatedly emphasized that the United States continues to be Norway's closest and most important partner on the global stage. Yet, even as that message is reiterated, a sharp question remains. Do the German Chancellor and the Canadian Prime Minister still believe the U.S. can be fully depended upon when it comes to security in the northern region? That exact question arose during a NATO press conference held in the middle of a large scale military exercise that brought together 30,000 troops from 14 different nations. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney stood side by side with the leaders of Germany and Norway, and the response he delivered sent a clear and unmistakable signal that the entire world, including Washington, is now watching very closely. Because this moment extended far beyond a routine NATO briefing. It pointed to something deeper and far more meaningful. Canada is gradually positioning itself as a serious and capable security actor in the Arctic. Through both his statements and actions, Carney made it clear that the future of security across the vast Arctic region may rely less solely on the United States and increasingly on a coordinated group of democratic middle powers working closely together. At a time when Donald Trump continues to question long-standing alliances, cast doubt on NATO's relevance, and even suggest new territorial ambitions in the Arctic, Canada is quietly building something very different. It is creating a new network of partners, shaping a revised defense strategy, and establishing a renewed role for itself on the global stage. The setting for this important moment could not have been more appropriate or symbolic. Norway, one of NATO's most strategically important Arctic members, was conducting a large-scale military exercise known as Cold Response. More than 30,000 troops from 14 nations were training together with a single shared objective to protect and defend the high north from potential threats. Standing with his European counterparts at the press conference, Carney began by highlighting an idea that is gaining increasing importance in today's complex geopolitical environment: the lasting strength and value of alliances. He spoke not about alliances based purely on power or dominance, but about partnerships rooted in shared democratic values and principles. And at a time when such alliances are under growing strain from multiple directions, his carefully chosen words carried real weight and meaning. We are like-minded nations, Carney said. We value fundamental principles at all times, while also recognizing the strength that comes from working together. All of us are committing major resources and making significant investments in our defense capabilities. And we understand that we can achieve far more collectively than individually. We are stronger when we collaborate effectively in areas such as space, stronger when we coordinate on defense, and even stronger when we align with nations that share similar values and perspectives. However, the central focus of this press conference went far beyond the military exercise or standard discussions about NATO cooperation. At its core, the conversation was centered on the Arctic itself. Today, the Arctic is no longer seen as a distant, frozen region at the top of the world. Instead, it has become one of the most strategically important and contested areas on the planet. Beneath its ice lie vast reserves of critical minerals, major energy resources, and newly accessible shipping routes that could reshape global trade and geopolitical dynamics for decades to come. This new reality has already sparked intense global competition. Russia has been expanding its military presence across the Arctic. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and is investing heavily in northern shipping routes and resource development. And the United States, under Donald Trump, has openly discussed acquiring Greenland and gaining access to its vast mineral wealth, raising concerns across Europe and Canada. For nations that actually border the Arctic, these developments reveal a deeper concern: a shifting geopolitical landscape where even long-standing alliances may be tested by growing competition over valuable resources. This is exactly why Mark Carney's remarks in Norway carried such importance. Rather than reacting defensively, Canada is choosing a more strategic and proactive approach. Carney is moving ahead by committing tens of billions of dollars to strengthen Arctic defense and infrastructure, expanding Canada's military presence across the Northern Territories, and transforming the Arctic from a neglected frontier into a secure, monitored, and economically connected region. In simple terms, while some leaders speak about acquiring new territory, Carney is focused on ensuring Canada maintains firm control over its own land and waters. We have committed to fundamentally reshaping our defense strategy, Carney said during the press conference, so that we can maintain a continuous presence 365 days a year on land, at sea, and in the air across a region that represents 40% of our landmass and 75% of our coastline. He added that the same region also shares a 3,000-kilometer border with the European Union. This commitment is supported by major financial investment. Just a day earlier, more than $40 billion in funding was announced for the Arctic, covering defense, broader security, and economic resilience in the region. The most revealing moment of the press conference came when journalists began asking direct questions. One question in particular addressed a concern many NATO allies have quietly held. Can the United States still be fully trusted when it comes to Arctic security? For decades, Canada and the United States have worked closely through systems like NORAD to defend North America. Their militaries are deeply integrated, and their intelligence operations work side by side. The Arctic has long been seen as a shared responsibility. But Donald Trump has changed the tone of that relationship. He has criticized NATO allies, questioned traditional partnerships, and suggested territorial ambitions such as acquiring Greenland. For European nations and Arctic countries, this rhetoric has created uncertainty. And that uncertainty explains why Canada is adjusting its strategy. Mark Carney did not reject the partnership with the United States, but he made one thing very clear. Canada will no longer assume that someone else will take primary responsibility for protecting the Arctic. Instead, Canada will take that responsibility itself, while working closely with partners who share its values, including Norway, Germany, and other NATO members. This represents a quiet but significant shift. While Trump has often challenged alliances, Carney is strengthening them, expanding Canada's presence in the Arctic, and building a coalition of democratic partners ready to defend the region together. When a Norwegian journalist pressed further, asking whether Canada and Germany still trust the United States on Arctic security, Carney responded carefully. Yes, he said before pausing. He explained that Canada continues to rely on NORAD, which remains a fully integrated defense system with the United States. But then he shifted the focus. Canada is now taking greater control and responsibility for defending its own Arctic. It is investing heavily and working closely with trusted allies like Norway and Germany, while also strengthening ties with Nordic and Baltic partners through NATO. These steps make Canada stronger, both independently and collectively. Reading between the lines, the message was clear. Canada still values its relationship with the United States, but it is no longer waiting for Washington to lead. Canada is building its own capabilities, forming its own partnerships, and defining its own strategy for Arctic security. This shift reflects a broader global trend: the rise of middle power coalitions. Countries like Canada, Germany, and Norway are working together to protect democratic systems, secure critical regions, and uphold the rules-based international order, not as replacements for the United States, but as capable partners ready to act when needed. A Canadian analyst later summarized the situation. Recent announcements, including the Prime Minister's visit to Yellowknife, are about asserting sovereignty in the Arctic. With increasing activity from Russia and China, Canada must strengthen its presence. There is also concern that the United States, under Trump, may pursue control over resource-rich regions like Greenland. The idea of being green-landed reflects real concern. Trump's repeated suggestions about acquiring Greenland have already unsettled allies. For Canada, which borders Greenland and has its own resource-rich Arctic territory, the implications are serious. If the U.S. considers taking territory from an ally, what does that mean for Canada's long-term sovereignty? Carney did not address this directly. Instead, his actions spoke clearly. The $40 billion investment, the year-round presence, and the strengthened partnerships all send the same message. Canada will defend its territory and protect its resources, with or without full U.S. support. The scale of Canada's Arctic is significant. It includes 40% of the country's landmass, 75% of its coastline, and a 3,000-kilometer connection to the European Union through Greenland. This is not a peripheral region. It is central to Canada's identity and future. For years, Canada relied on the United States for Arctic defense. But those assumptions are no longer valid. The region is changing rapidly, competition is increasing, and Canada is stepping up to take responsibility. The $40 billion plan includes more than military equipment. It involves ports, airstrips, surveillance systems, and communication networks. It is about building the infrastructure needed to maintain a constant presence across a vast and strategic region. It also sends a clear message to other nations. Canada is present, engaged, and ready to defend its interests. European allies have strongly supported this approach. Germany and Norway made it clear they see Canada as a key partner in Arctic security. Cooperation through NATO, particularly with Nordic and Baltic countries, is expanding. This points to a new Arctic framework, one that includes Canada, Norway, Germany, and other European partners working together to secure the region. The message to Washington is clear, even if not stated directly. The United States is welcome to be part of this effort, but the coalition will continue to grow and function regardless of whether the U.S. chooses to lead. What happened in Norway was more than a routine NATO event. It was a signal. Canada is stepping into a larger role. European allies are recognizing Canada as a central partner, and global security may increasingly depend on networks of nations working together rather than a single dominant power. Carney's actions carry broader implications. By announcing $40 billion in Arctic investments alongside European partners, Canada is reducing its reliance on the United States. By strengthening ties with Norway and Germany, it is integrating into European security structures. By addressing trust carefully, Carney maintained the U.S. relationship while signaling independence. By highlighting the Arctic's connection to Europe, he reinforced its global importance. And by making these announcements during a major NATO exercise, he ensured the message reached the entire alliance. The contrast with Donald Trump is clear. While Trump questions alliances and discusses acquiring territory, Carney is investing, building partnerships, and strengthening cooperation. While Trump creates uncertainty, Carney is creating stability and structure. The question about U.S. reliability is one many NATO allies are asking. Carney's response reflected a new reality. The United States remains important, but it can no longer be assumed to lead in every situation. What took place in Norway will likely be studied for years. Carney presented a clear vision for Arctic security, one where Canada leads, Europe partners closely, and the United States participates but is no longer the sole pillar. The $40 billion investment provides the foundation. Partnerships with Norway and Germany provide structure. And the message to Washington reflects the outcome. Canada is taking control of its future. Canada is no longer waiting. It is investing, building capabilities, forming alliances, and preparing to defend its Arctic interests independently if necessary. And while the United States remains welcome, it is no longer the only path forward. This is what modern leadership looks like. It is not about pressuring allies or questioning partnerships. It is about investing wisely, building cooperation, and addressing shared challenges together. Mark Carney has demonstrated exactly that, and the world has taken notice.